Right, does this work? It does, hooray, okay. We're just down some fonts, but other than that, it's all right. I'm Chris Knowles, I'm here from Jagex in Cambridge. I'm a senior engine developer there. And I'm here to talk to you today about some of the challenges, in particular in making multiplayer games and how to avoid some of the pitfalls. So a bit about me, I've been at Jagex for 12 years. When I joined up, actually, I wasn't making games. I was in the department that did all of the software that wasn't a game. So I wrote billing systems and login systems and other such thrilling things, as you might imagine. But after a couple of years, I was able to join a game team and I've shipped 3 games there. And I've now spent several years working on RuneScape itself, which is our big MMO. My other hat, and this is a very new shiny hat, is I've also gone indie. So this is literally my first week of not doing any hours at Jagex. So I still do 5 days a month. I haven't even got a website to show you yet, but that's me on Twitter. My main goals for December are to get married, go on honeymoon and have Christmas. So not much is happening then. But in January, I'm going to start streaming the development. So if you want to come and hang out and chat about game dev stuff, I'm always happy to answer questions. If you guys want to come and ask about that. And I'm going to try and negotiate the notes on this PC at the same time as I do the thing on the other screen. So we'll see how that works. All right. So, yes, I'm here today really to try to convince you of 2 things. One is that making games is hard. And I mean, it's really hard. There are lots of challenges, particularly when you're making big online games of scalability and performance that you don't get in lots of other areas of software engineering. But also, that means it's fun, it's interesting, it's challenging. And most of what I'm going to say, you can sidestep by making a single-player game. But even 1v1 multiplayer has various challenges going on with it. And when you scale it up to full-on MMO, like RuneScape, things get very difficult. So, I would like you to picture the scene. You finished your degree. You're out in the world of work, you're in some big company or you've started an indie thing and you've made a game, it's done. And you know it's fun and it's polished and it's easy to get into and it looks good and it sounds good and everything works fine. If you just throw a game that works absolutely fine in the office with everyone playing nicely out into the world, that's probably going to end badly. And in fact, you're going to encounter 2 groups of people in your careers who are going to do everything they can to burst your bubble about how well your game works. The first group is this people. QA testers, who of course don't just come in at the end, they're all the way through, but they are going to find odd ways to break stuff that you thought was fine. They'll find bugs, they'll find ways that players can get stuck and can't progress. Depending on what the bug is, it might come down to someone in your discipline to fix it. And you could easily get frustrated with QA testers because you do a thing and you think it works and you send it off and you start working on the next thing and then they come back and say, no, this doesn't work, and you have to. But don't get frustrated with them. They're, a vital part of our industry. They're there to do the same thing we are, which is make great games for players. We need them. The stuff we push out would be really janky without these guys finding all the problems ahead of time. So do be lovely to them. QA can be a bit of a grind. There's often big test plans you have to go through and you have to do it at the same time. Every new build needs to get tested and it can be a bit repetitive. Do also be prepared for them to do slightly odd things. The weirdest bug report we ever had was a QA tester saying, I can reliably crash this iPhone game. All I have to do is lick the screen. And if ever you wanted to make a case for, I need my own iPhone to do the reproduction steps rather than using someone else's, that was the time you really wanted your own phone. Was a problem with multi-touch input and how we were handling that, turns out, and the tongue confused it. But yes, so they're lovely, they're vital, be wonderful to them, just be prepared for them to be slightly odd. There is another group of people who are going to do everything they can to break your game. And that's these people, players. These people, who frankly are menaces to society, they are going to download your game. They're going to install your game, and then, as if that wasn't enough, they're going to play your game. They're going to log into it. They are going to put load on your infrastructure, those wonderful, beautiful servers in their pristine state. They're going to start doing things to them. And they're not going to do like sensible stuff like any normal person would do. No. They're going to do weird things that you don't understand. Why would you ever want to do that? Why would you do that in that order? Why have you discovered the bug we didn't even know about, where if you stand still with a banana in your hand and spin 3 times around on a Tuesday, your character falls through the floor? How did you work that out? Somebody's going to do that. And hopefully, they will file a bug report, but they might just go on Reddit and have a rant about it. And frankly, making games would be a lot easier without these people. However, I have launched a couple of games that didn't have very many players, and they don't exist anymore. So they are quite useful players. And really, obviously, we're there for their benefit. So we're trying to make games that will entertain them, educate them, challenge them, change them in some way. Everyone's going to be changed by the games you make. They might just be changed into slightly more relaxed people. Nothing wrong with that. But we are going to change people by what we do. But there are some people who are actually going to try and deliberately break your game, either because they want to get some advantage by doing so, or because they just think it's kind of fun to ruin things for everyone else. And that means that a game that works fine in the office, with everyone playing nice and the networking's nice and simple, and no one's trying to do anything untoward, if you throw that game out into the world, that's going to end badly. And it won't necessarily be because your game is buggy. It might not be that there's a problem with the software. It might not be that something is broken and they're exploiting it. It might just be that what you've written isn't sufficient. It's not robust in the face of players messing about. Okay, so let me give you an example from a game we shipped called Chronicle. It was a RuneScape-themed card game, and the game took place over several rounds, and it was all set in this magical book. So you would, at the start of a new round, the page would flip, and lots of terrain would kind of rise up out of the book and build the particular level you were on. So you can see we're on the Wizard's Tower here. That's what this thing is. That's in the middle of rising up out of the book in this screenshot, and it kind of towers over the whole thing. And once that's all loaded up, then the server gives you your fresh set of cards for the new round, and off you go. And your opponent, that's the raptor, that's my opponent over there. And obviously the length of time it takes to load all those assets off disk, get them into memory, play the animation, that will vary depending on the spec of the PC of the player. And so the server can't really start the round until both clients have said, oh, I've done that bit now, I'm ready, we can carry on. So the question then is, what happens if one player manages to arrange for their client to just never quite get round to sending that message? I'm not talking about a disconnection. We can handle those, that's fine. The server and client keep pinging each other, make sure they can get through. If a client disconnects, it will notice, it will try and reconnect. Assuming it gets through, we can put it back into the game. That's all fine. But what if a player can just convince their client to never quite get round to sending that message? And we had this problem in our beta. Players would get into a game, it would start up, the thing would load, and they'd just sit there. And they'd wait. And think, well, this is odd. This is a beta, maybe it's just broken, I don't know what's going on. And they just sort of, quit the game or concede that match and try and get into another one. And we were able to work out quite quickly, actually, what was going on in this particular case. So here is a top tip for you. If you would like to abuse a bug in a live game, don't stream yourself doing it on Twitch. We banned that guy pretty fast. But what he'd worked out was, if he played the game in a window rather than full screen, and he started to drag the screen, the animations paused until he'd finished. So he'd just start to drag, prop a book up on his mouse, and just sit there, waiting for his opponent to get bored and concede. And hey, you got a free victory. Go him. And the reason he was able to do that wasn't so much because there was a bug. It's because we hadn't done anything in the server to spot this activity and to deal with it. Okay. And so that brings us really to the heart of what I'm getting at. The reason this guy was able to do this was because the server trusted the client and said, well, it's taking you a very long time. Maybe you're just a low-spec machine. Well, we'll hang on for you. You do the best you can, little PC. We're waiting for you to get back to us any minute now. We'll trust you. Any second, no, really, any minute. It's all good. And it would just wait indefinitely for the client to finish. That allowed someone to cheat. And the problem wasn't that there was a bug. The code we'd written worked exactly as we wanted it to. The problem was what we'd written wasn't enough. It wasn't robust in the face of this guy exploiting something he'd discovered. So, what's the solution to this? Well, the lesson you learn really is never, ever, ever trust the client, right? You made it, you know what it does, but as soon as you've given it to your players, they know what it does as well, and they can muck about with it, modify it, work around it, and so on. So what does that look like? A good example is RuneScape, our MMO. Here's my character in the middle of vampire territory, and every interaction I make with the world goes via the server, right? Even if I'm walking around, if I click over here, then all that does is sends a message to the server saying, the player's clicked on the floor there, they'd like to walk there, please decide if that's okay, and then get back to me. And assuming there is a valid route, the server doesn't even send the route to the client. It just says, right, I need you to walk 1 square northwest. And when you've done that, I need you to walk 1 square northwest. Everything is mediated by the server. And that means it's really robust to players ending up, glitching through walls, ending up somewhere they're not supposed to, that kind of thing. But we actually go further than this. So pretty much every interface is also run on the server. The server knows what UI you have showing, and when you click on an interface component, that sends a message to the server saying, the player has clicked this button, please decide what that means. Now some stuff does run on the client, some interfaces, because they're a bit more responsive, But when you're interacting with the world, everything is checked by the server before absolutely anything happens. And now there are some drawbacks to that, so you can get some performance issues. Normally when we're optimizing games or after graphics optimizations, but in this case, the server is doing the bulk of the work for 2,000 players in a RuneScape server. It needs to be very, very fast. The content is written in a scripting language, which is then run on a script runner by the server. There's an overhead to that. It's less efficient than just running code. That thing needs to go like greased lightning. And that's a really meaty problem. How can we get the performance, keep the performance up? As the game gets bigger and more complicated, the amount of scripting there is to run goes up. How do we keep it performing well over time? There's also a responsiveness issue. So RuneScape is a tick-based game. So every tick, the server looks at all the messages that come from the clients, works out what to do with those, does all the script processing it needs to update the players, update the NPCs, all of that lot, and then starts sending information out to players about what's changed around them. And it does that every 600 milliseconds, because it takes a while. And so if I click to walk somewhere, the maximum amount of time I might have to wait before I see my player do anything is 600 milliseconds plus my ping to the server and back. And when RuneScape was written in 2001 and everybody had a modem, that was fine because no one really noticed and it was fairly normal. But we do know that these days, some players come to RuneScape fresh and they kind of bounce off it because it seems a bit clunky compared to what they're expecting. RuneScape is still successful, existing players understand it, but it's not ideal in the modern era. Actually, we are talking about how we can do some things to mitigate these problems. But although that works quite well for something like RuneScape, there are some games where you just can't really do things that way. For example, first-person shooters. This is a game called Block and Load that we published. It's sort of Team Fortress 2 meets Minecraft. And if I'm playing an FPS and I press W and it takes 600, 700, 800 milliseconds for my player to react, that's just not playable. My player needs to start reacting to the world, to my input, straight away. And so at some point, some sense, the client needs to understand what happens when you press W. In RuneScape, you click somewhere, the client has no idea what that means, it just sends the message on, and then the server tells it. But in an FPS, the client needs to know how to deal with that. And so it then needs to relay what's going on to the server needs to sort of keep up, make sure everything's in track. But what the server mustn't do is start trusting the client about what the state of the player is. You always end up in all kinds of nasty situations. So player position. The server can't just say, well, the client says he's over here and now he's on the other side of the level, that's probably fine. The server needs to be verifying that what the client is claiming, works in the constraints of the game, how fast are they moving, that kind of thing. If I've got a gun that fires bullets in some spread and there's a little bit of deflection to them, it's quite nice if the bullet isn't quite down the line and goes off slightly, and that means it smacks someone in the head. It's quite nice if the server agrees that smacks someone in the head, because that's quite useful. But what the server mustn't do is allow the client to control the bullet spread completely, because otherwise you could say, well, what do you know? Well, I keep rolling zeros in a random number generator, and they're just going straight down the line. The server needs some way of checking that the client is not mucking about. What else? Oh yeah, enemy position. If any information the server sends to the client, the player may be able to see, even if they're not supposed to, because if the client knows, the player can know. So if you're sending the position of every single player in your 64-person, FPS map, then a modified client can start showing players where things are. There was a glorious issue, I think it was in the late 90s, when graphics cards were new and shiny, and the manufacturers wanted to show how amazing and shiny they were and how wizard they were, and you should definitely get one. When they released a driver for one card where you could force every single texture in the game to be transparent. Isn't that amazing? Yeah, particularly nice when I can see where everybody is in the level. So it caused problems. And so if you're going to transmit information that the client doesn't need, you need to be aware that the client may show it even though it's not supposed to. You have the issue of things like lag compensation. So if you play FPSs, you'll know that where I think you are on my screen is slightly behind where the server thinks they are, and the server is slightly behind where you think they are. You think you are. But if I on my screen appear to shoot you in the head, the server ought to say, well, that seems fair because you shot where you thought they were and you scored a hit, so we'll let that stand. But if I can push a button on my client and it stops processing messages to and from the server, so you don't move, and I then line up a nice headshot and bang, and then I push another button and the messages start to flow. If the server says, oh, well, you kind of went away a bit for a minute there, but that's fine, and also you got a headshot, well done you, then that's a problem, that's exploitable. So you want the server to be suspicious of unusual network activity. Aim bots and recoil bots are quite difficult to detect. If the screen is supposed to flick every time you pull the trigger and someone modifies their client and not do that, that's quite hard to spot. So these are all kinds of issues derived from the fact that the client needs to respond quickly. You can't wait for the server to tell it what it's supposed to do. And so to some extent, you're having to trust the client about the state of the world. And frankly, if you can come up with a robust solution to all of these problems, then you can name your price. Right? You can kick back in the Bahamas at that point because we'll all be interested in it. Right now, the kind of thing we have to deal with this stuff are things like the Valve anti-cheat system and BattleEye, which is used in Fortnite and PUBG, I think, which, among other things, actually serve bits of code to your PC and run stuff in there looking for you doing strange things to your client. And you know, VAC bans are common. People get banned from Counter-Strike all the time, but that only happens after they've been able to ruin someone's fun. And there's an arms race. People making hacks can sell them, so they want to keep getting around these detection systems, and so they have to keep pushing on it. And every now and then, even a pro esports player will be caught doing something dodgy in a competition. So these are hard problems. You could make a career out of tackling this kind of thing if you wanted to. Now in RuneScape, we don't really have the problem of people trying to aimbot their way around things and sort of automate PvP. The big problem we have are bots. So if you go to old school RuneScape, which is the throwback version, and make no changes to your character appearance at all, that's what you look like. So as far as any RuneScape player is concerned, that's a bot. And the reason people want to bot RuneScape is they want to generate in-game wealth by doing stuff in the game, to earn gold pieces, and they can then sell that on the black market for actual cash. And now we don't want that because it affects the economy. It's annoying for players if they turn up to a mining site and it's full of bots nicking all the resources. It can be associated with credit card fraud. We don't want it in the game. One problem RuneScape has is that when it was written in 2001, it was written in Java, which was lovely because it meant you could run Java applets in browsers in those days, and every Windows came with Java back in those days. So you could go to the website, click play, it appeared in your browser, no installation, no friction, very easy, lovely. But when the reflection framework came along, which is a way to write Java code that does things to Java code, that made it very easy to hook into the RuneScape client, see what it was doing and kind of automate it and get it to play the game for you. So how do we deal with this problem? Well, one solution would be to stop using Java, which we've done with RuneScape. So there's RuneScape and there's old school RuneScape. The modern version now has a native C++ client. We're hoping to get rid of the Java version by the end of the year, and that will cut down on that enormously. For old school, we haven't got that, but what we have got is a lot of investment in an obfuscation tool, which again is a big, meaty, challenging problem. So that will mangle the client every time we build it. It moves code around, adds dead-end stuff that doesn't really do anything, but makes it hard to see what's going on. And that's an interesting problem. How do you change the code around so that it ends up with the same end result, but is harder to follow through and without degrading performance too much? How can you make that work? The problem with it is all you can really do with that is raise the bar. No matter what you do to your client, ultimately you've got to give it to people to use. And at that point, they can see how it works, they can take it apart, they can work out what you've done, and they can reverse it. So we want to tackle bots, and we've had various approaches over the years. We don't have a Jagex anti-cheat, we don't run code on your computer and see what you're doing. What we do have is a lot of analytics, because of course everything you do in RuneScape is mediated by the server, and we can look for suspicious patterns. So we can do things like we can spot gold farming networks. So those red accounts, those are the actual bot accounts that are getting the in-game wealth, and the lines are trades. So the wealth then moves into mule accounts that move it around, and then the end customers are the ones in green at the bottom. Those are people buying in-game cash. And because we can track all of this stuff and we can spot it, we can take action. Hijacking is another thing. So I've blurred this all out, but those blue accounts are old established accounts which, for some mysterious reason, are transferring all of their wealth to that one in the middle. And that's because they've been hijacked and they're being cleared out. And obviously, if you're going to get all that wealth, you need to be able to give it to someone else. So this is the corresponding outward graph, where the account is now giving lots of wealth to people who've bought it. And because we have all this, we can build these graphs up, we can spot these behaviors, we can take action. So we do this a lot. So in 2019 so far, we've removed over 5 trillion gold pieces between the two games. That is several $1 million worth if you were on the black market. We've banned over 5 million accounts. You can see old school is much more heavily botted, partly because of the Java thing, also because actually, for various reasons, a million gold pieces in old school is worth more than 1 million gold pieces in RuneScape, so there's more incentive to go that side. And this is an arms race again, because people want to make that money, but we've got a lot of experts pushing hard on it, and over time this is a battle we win more and more. And again, this isn't strictly what you might call games work, this is all analytic stuff, but again, there's a career here if you want it, dealing with people trying to game your system for cash. So, games are hard. They're really hard because of those pesky players. Multiplayer is particularly hard. But I hope you can see there's a lot of cool, interesting stuff you can get done. Because of the particular challenges in multiplayer, I hope that some of you guys, when you finish your studies, will be keen to come and help us out, because frankly, we could do with an extra hand. Thank you very much.
I was just thinking that's fascinating. I think players, we talk a lot about how like everything's fine and groovy until you get people in and then they mess everything up in the nicest way possible. Are there any questions? Are there questions? Can't see this, so like super lights. It's like the episode of Star Trek where they any questions?
Can I see the slide again with all the problems? The ones that where I can retire in the Bahamas.
Oh yes, yeah. If you can fix all of that, if you can make all of that impossible, then yeah, if you can make all of that impossible in a client, then you'd be sorted. Yeah, that's your ticket.
Okay, if there's no questions, I'm pretty sure we'll be around. Thank you again, and another massive round of applause.